Hey everybody, Lawrence and Precious here with Dirty Basement Drain coming at you with another one. Now, a while ago, back around the beginning of October of 2024, I was on the Tabletop Crafters page and I saw a post from a member, Nate Harris, showing these Halloween laser cut houses at Michael's for like $5 a piece. I was like, oh, those are kind of cool. I was like, okay, now let me check this out. So I was looking, and then he did a gorgeous conversion of it right here. And I was like, wow. It's like, I got to get my butt to Michael's. Well, I went to my local Michael's. They didn't have any of the houses. So I went on to their website and ordered a bunch. And they were only $5 a piece. So I was like, I can do something with these. I mean, I'd already taken a bunch of stuff off of this one here, but I was like, Nate's look really good, but I was like, I want to do it in DBT style, along with my helper here. So I want to show you how I went from this to this. It's the same house that Nate used, but like I said, I did it in my style. So before we get to it, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons: Dungeon Matron, Quarel, Mia Geeked, Sykes, and Rick Spotton. Your guys' help every month is greatly appreciated, and I can't thank you enough. And there I just lost my helper. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so here's the actual Michael's house prior to anything being taken off, even the tags and stickers. Pretty nice looking, and gotta bother tearing this off. That can be removed by hand, no problem. Now, a lot of the pieces that I want to take off are glued on with wood glue, and a way to get wood glue off is to soak it in some vinegar. Now, I'm just going to basically put little spots of vinegar around all the little pieces I want to tear off, just to make it easier for later. I could cover these up if I wanted to, but I want as flat of a surface as I can to work with, so all these pieces I don't want on, I'm going to tear off. So just putting vinegar around all the edges of everything that is going to be removed, and just let the vinegar soak in and dissolve that glue that's holding all these pieces on. I'm using the pipette just so I can be as precise as I can with where it goes. And I'm using, torn up pieces of paper towel just to keep the vinegar where it is, and so it'll keep soaking in and won't dry up real quick. And it'll just slowly eat away at all that glue that's in there. This idea actually was suggested to me by one of my patron members, Dungeon Matron. I can't thank you enough. It made stripping these things down so easy. So thank you, Dungeon Matron. I appreciate that. But again, just little strips of paper towel and putting it around anywhere that I'm going to have the vinegar, and just letting the vinegar soak up in that paper towel just so it'll eat away at the wood glue that's in place. Now that the wood glue's had some time to soak, I'm just starting to tear away at the pieces. This may require more than one go at tearing the stuff off, or soaking with vinegar, but a lot of it just pops right off, especially the thinner pieces. It ate away the glue. Who knows? A cooking item that you also use for cleaning can eat away glue. But again, I'm just using something to pry it up, anything to get underneath the glued on piece and just gently pry it up, or maybe not so gently, but I managed to get most of what I want off. Even a pair of pliers, like I said, not so gently. Now obviously this is going to require an additional soak to get the finer pieces off where the glue is still holding on pretty good, but in the end, it works. And as you can see, there's some smaller pieces from the first round, and I've been soaking again. And it does come off. It takes some effort, but these little extra pieces that I personally just want gone so I can have a flat surface to work on, does come off without damaging the part you want to work on too much. Now, I wanted mine to be longer, so I made a template out of some chipboard, attached to some 3-inch thick foam, and then cut around the chipboard, and I have my extension that will match the house exactly. Yeah, pretty simple. Of course, I glued the two pieces together, but I wanted it to have more of a peak at the roof, so I measured it, and I got to cut a long piece of foam just so I can make a peak. And I have this scrap piece of foam which I beat the ever-loving crap out of. That will be perfect because this is all going to be covered up. So any of those holes that are there will not be visible. But again, this is just taking measurements, making sure it's close enough to where I want it, and cutting it to the right dimensions. Of course, now I actually want to cut it into a peak and not just a straight up big long stovepipe looking piece. So I'm going to cut the piece that I cut to the width at an angle, and I honestly don't remember what angle was. I was just kind of like, maybe this will work. So I'm just cutting an angle piece off, flipping it around, and then pushing it through again so I can get basically what I want. But save those scraps. They come useful for later. And as you can see, it matches up. Of course, I don't want a peak, so I'm going to have to trim that down eventually. Try and get this straight up again. Ugh. Yeah, sometimes adjusting the angle can be a pain in the butt, but it's worth it. Okay, now that I got this, I'm going to gently push this through because I want to have the peak itself. I don't want an actual point. I kind of want a flat top, if that makes any sense, even though I was just trying to get rid of the flat top. Again, just run it through, use one of the pieces that I cut off earlier. Sometimes it's a pain in the butt, but it works. And then cut off, and boom, I have my rooftop piece. Yeah, of course, I gotta trim it up. I don't know why I'm going through so much effort, honestly, because it's all gonna be covered up. Maybe it's just the OCD in me, I don't know. And of course now, quick splop of hot glue, and I'm gonna slap it on. And there I have my substructure for the roof is done. Now, I want to have a little bump outs for the windows for the second floor, and those angle pieces I just cut off. Hey, I told you, save the offcuts; they can be useful. So I'm just gonna. Then they already match the angle of the roof, so boom. At least for that side, it does. And I'm gonna cut a few pieces up that will eventually I'm gonna start carving down into what will be the windows. Again, this part, I'm just kind of eyeballing. That looks good. Maybe. This is all like eyeballing. There's no like super accurate measurements. And I didn't even bother. I was like, with these angles, I don't even want to bother with the hot wire. I'll just cut up with the blade. Now for the other side, the pants. Remember that template I made? It's going to make the windows for the other side even easier. So always save your templates. Don't throw them out. Eventually you may use them. And so now I have a perfect way of cutting pieces that will fit exactly into the building itself. Of course, this piece was a little bit tall for my Proxxon, so I had to pull the pins out, but hey, it worked. In the end, I got what I needed. As you see, boom, fits right where it needs to go. Or at least eventually it will. I need to make these a little thinner. I don't need one big... Of course, that would be actually... I do have more of these houses, and that would be a cool idea to have one big long piece like that. But anyway... For now, I'm just cutting him down to the shape that I actually need for the house itself. And here I am, once again, measure. These pieces I'm not going to eyeball. I actually kind of want to get a center line because I'm thinking these windows need to have like roof pieces on them just for aesthetics. Because, well, this is mine, so I'm going to do it the way I want to. But it'll just look cooler if I have a roof on top of these windows. The same as I did with the previous ones. So it's just a matter of checking, and then try and get to a point where I'm happy. And hoping I can get a straight cut on this hot wire. But again, even if it's not perfectly straight, I can always trim it up, and then any mistakes will be covered up later. Now that I got these pieces cut to about, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it to where they're going to go. I'll mark it, and then, yeah, that looks good. Get out the hot glue gun, and then put them in place. Now, one of the things I do when I have a lot of scrap is I'll cut them down into bricks and timbers, and I have boxes of these just ready to go. So right now I'm just texturing up a bunch of the pre-prepared pieces, and they will be used for all the timber framing that I'm going to be using on this build. And there's going to be a decent amount. Maybe not as much as what some people put on, but it's going to need it for the look. And of course, I have more pre-prepared pieces, and I am just using a cobblestone texture roller that I bought from Temu to get a nice cobblestone pattern, which I'm going to be using on the lower parts of the first floor. Just so like the first half it's sitting on stone. I could do, carve the pattern out by hand, but for a couple bucks, I can get a texture roller from Temu, and boom, I got it. Or if you have a 3D printer, you can print one out yourself. Now here I'm adding on all the timber and different places where I think it looks good, and I forgot to record that how I glued on all the cobblestone pattern pieces, but you saw me doing that, so come on, it's gluing foam on the wood. Also, I did forget to record making the door, unfortunately, so I apologize for that. Now here I'm just using some serial cardboard or stock, whatever, but this actually came out from some cat food boxes, but I want to cover up the larger openings with this, just so for later I have a flat surface to work on and not a big gaping giant hole. And I'll also use this in other areas to cover up any holes that I don't want there. Now I got all that done and most of the timber framing is done. I decided, this needs a chimney. So I'm just taking a few quick measurements of how I want the chimney, and I am once again using some chipboard, and I am drawing out a pattern for a chimney. Now again, I'm going to make a template out of this, and this is something I saved. I have a little drawer full of templates that I've made. I may only ever use it once, but the thing is, I have a little drawer full of templates that I've made, and if I ever say, hey, I made this once before, what, don't I have the template? Save any template you make, because they could come in use eventually. But again, I'm just double checking my measurements, how wide I want the chimney to be on the house. It's like, okay, the main part of the chimney, basically one width, but you want the base of the chimney to be bigger. So I'm just have to measure against the house itself to how big I want it. I'm just kind of eyeball. This is not actually eyeballing, but just like, yeah, that looks good. No, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah. That I did that a lot. I do that a lot with my builds. But hey, and now it's like that's, I don't know if I'd like that width. May go a little wider. Let's say that's the thing. You keep going until you like how it looks. It's a pretty simple concept. There's no like, you have to do it this way. This is fantasy. Rules don't apply. Do it till you're happy. And now I'm cutting the template out. Now I'm deciding exactly how thick I want my chimney to be. And I'm grabbing my chunk of foam here, and I think I went with 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches. No, 1.5 inches. And double checking the ends and stuff here, just kind of eyeballing it. And I don't want any factory edges for this piece, so I'm just trimming away all the factory edges because they're a little bit harder to carve than the unfinished or not factory edges, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. But again, just kind of cleaning up this piece before I actually attach the template, and just getting it ready for the template and ready for the carving step. Now that I got it to where I want it, I'm just quickly pinning the template to it, the foam itself, to hold it still, because I do not want it shifting around when I cut and I would have to do it all over again. So it's just better to pin it. You might get a few holes, but the holes can be covered up. And just slowly cut away and get your basic chimney done. I want to get rid of all these hard corners and sharp edges off this because this is not made out of cinder blocks. We don't want any sharp corners on this. So I'm just rounding it off with a sanding sponge and just smoothing it out and making it look pretty. And of course, there needs to be a hole in the top of the chimney. So I'm just using an X-Acto blade and just cramming out a hole. And I'll just keep cutting it till it's as big as I need. And then I'll get an emery board and smooth it out. Now that I got the hole done, I want to do... Just a lot of times I'll do brick patterns, but for some reason I wanted this to have a cobblestone look to it. So just grabbing my massively expensive number 2 pencil carving tool and just carving in some random stone pattern. And the thing is, you don't have to carve it all the way around on all 4 sides. You only have to carve the sides that are exposed. So I only did 3 most of the way up. And of course, have to double check against where I got to cut away some of the timber framing and stonework that I had done before I decided I needed a chimney. And that's pretty simple. It's just simple trimming, get some blades, and then gently cut it away until you get to where you need to be. Easy peasy. Now that I've got everything cut away and ready to go, it's just a matter of slapping down a bunch of hot glue and then smacking your chimney into place and adjusting it so it's flush. Easy peasy. God, I said that again. But anyway, yeah, it's a quick, easy thing to do. Okay, and now I'm going to start making the windows. And of course, granny grading, or whatever it's actually called. But we all call it granny grading, so I'm actually just using my cutting mat there to get the measurements for how wide and tall I need the grading to be. And then just cutting it into little squares that I need for the windows. This part is actually pretty simple if you as long as you use a guide and you can cut out the grading real quick. Now I'm using some of the textured timber I did earlier, some smaller pieces, and just cutting out window frames. This is not rocket surgery. And now that I got all the window frames cut out, it's just a matter of getting I'm using PVA tacky glue, and then just gluing together and letting them dry on a piece of parchment paper so I can peel them off easily. This process is a bit tedious, but it's not too difficult. While I'm waiting for the windows to dry, I'm going to start adding all the shingles. Now, all these shingles were cut out of foam using a shingle jig that I got from Dungeons by Hand, quite a while ago. But they've been they're a tremendous piece of tool for your hot wire cutter if you have one. But I had done these quite a while ago, and I cut so much that I put them in storage in a bin just to have for use for later, and now it's later, so I didn't have to really cut any shingles out for this. I already had them cut. But again, I'm just hot gluing them in place and alternating the rows. Now, on top of where all the windows are, there's a little bit of flat spot, and on top of the main roof that I want to have a piece of timber on that I didn't add until after the shingles. So this is just, I'm texturing a piece of foam and boom, slap it in place. Done. It's just a quick step. It's more timber work, but it looks really good. Now that the windows are dry, I need to glue them in place. Now I'm using some black Mod Podge here, just to basically hold them in place until I get to a step later. I could use hot glue, but I didn't want any of the hot glue seeping up through the grating, so I figured the Mod Podge was a better choice, and it'll also black out behind the windows, which is what I want. And of course, I black Mod Podged the whole thing, and then I decided now I need to start doing the stucco work. I'm just using my homemade texture paste, and then anywhere that stucco goes, I'm just using a cheap beater brush and then brushing it into place. This process, again, honestly, it is a bit tedious, but it's not difficult. Sometimes getting into the corners can be a bit of a pain, but that's what a small rounded pointed brush, cheap beater brush is for. Now that I got all the stucco done and it's dry, I'm just using an airbrush to primer all the granny grating in the windows so I can paint it later. You could absolutely do this with a rattle can if you want, but the granny grating is kind of notorious for not holding paint well, so I do want to primer it. And since I have the paint in my airbrush already, I'm just going to give another primer coat onto the rest of the build, just to make sure I got all the foam covered in black. Because I noticed there were a few little bits and pieces of green foam showing through. So, again, this is just a matter of making sure everything's got a nice black coat to it. Of course, now I actually want to start getting some color on this thing. Finally, yes, my favorite part, one of my favorite parts. It's like, build this. Oh, wait, now it's starting to look like something. I'm just putting a dark brown, a burnt umber color in all the timber work. Just my go-to for wood. But all my painting is done in 3 steps. A base color, which is dark, a mid-tone, and then a highlight, at least for, most of my painting. But this is just a quick dark brown on all the woodwork. And now I'm actually putting a dark gray on all the stonework, and all the cobblestone down by the bottom, and then eventually I'll get the chimney as well. This is just a dark blue-gray. I like the blue because I don't know, the blue tint to the gray, because I just like it. So that's what I'm going with. And then, of course, all the stucco work. I actually think I used, for the base color, light mocha. Because, the stucco work does have a bit of a off-white appearance to it. So I'm going a lot lighter than everything else with this. Again, I'm just using cheap beater brushes for this stuff. And, of course, the roof tiles. Base color, a dark. I wanted to go with red for these for these shingles, so I'm just using like a dark brown red or a brick red. I'm not even sure at this point, but whatever color you just. Again, this is just my method of doing it: dark, medium, light, and so the shingles are getting a dark red. Now I like to mix up the colors of the stones just to give a little more visual interest. And it's like not all stone is gray. So got some random colors. Matter of fact, I'm using some of the base colors that are still in my poppet thing there, poppet paint tray. And just picking out individual cobblestones. And I'll do this with the chimney as well. And I'll use multiple colors. And right now, it is blaringly ugly, but with all the different colors. But once I do the next two shades of gray, you'll barely be able to notice it, but you'll still see it. And as you can see, I'm using my mid-tone, which is just basically a gray. And it's already starting to downplay the brightness of the individual stones I painted up. But, this is my go-to method I use. I just like the way it looks. And it breaks up the uniformity of a single color. And of course, my mid-tone color for all the timber framing, which is just, I think, a nutmeg brown. Yeah, nutmeg brown. All these color names that I actually spent out are all Apple Barrel, which is my favorite brand of cheap craft paint to use. Available at Walmart. It's like 58 cents last time I checked up for a 2-ounce bottle. So, and they got decent amount of pigment. Now that I got all that done, I'm going over all the stucco work with I think, an antique parchment. No, I am actually using the one color that's not Apple Barrel. It's a Deco Art Americana Desert Sand color. Just as a highlight color for all the stucco. Now, for the stucco work, though, I'll actually only be using two colors. The base coat and then this coat. And then you'll see later on why I only use two colors. I found that I really don't have to do 3 steps for the stucco. I found I like the way the 2-step process works for the stucco, and that's just the method I use. Okay, now that I've finally gotten all the other stuff done, it's time to do a mid-tone for all the shingles and make them start popping a little bit more. I think for this mid-tone color, I was using bright red, basically red, and just doing an overbrush the same as I've done with all the other stuff, going for 75 to 85% coverage, with everything else leaving the deepest cracks and recesses alone just to make added shadows and high. This is like a beginning of a highlight. This is an overbrush. And now that all that's dry, it's time to actually start doing the third highlight color for the shingles here. I'm using a honeysuckle pink. Yeah, I know, weird. Wow, I didn't even know what that color was until just now. I just kind of grabbed off my paint shelf, and it's like, yeah, that color, yeah, that looks good. I don't look at the color names much, but just use a makeup brush and dry brush all the shingles and basically highlight and make all the texture pop. And of course here I'm dry brushing all the stonework with a light gray. And as you can see, those different color stones are dulling down even more. And by the end, they'll be really dulled down. But when you look at it, you won't just see you still see the different stone colors, but they won't be so glaringly obvious. But it's still enough there that it breaks up that solid gray, and I like it that way. And of course, now working on all the timber frame, this on a dry brush with the light mocha, being careful not to hit everything else that I just dry brush, but it's honestly not that difficult. It takes a little bit of practice, but it can be done. And the thing is, if you're trying to control a little more precise, you might have to go for a small, tiny dry brush just so you can avoid hitting stuff. But still, it's very easy to actually get all this done without getting colors over everything. Though, even all the dry brushing I do have accents where I do accidentally hit spots that don't want the color that I'm using. Oh, that beautiful paint job I just finished. Let's screw it all up. I'm using a homemade dark brown wash. This gives it a little more dingy and dirty look to it, and I like using this because sometimes you get a little overzealous with your dry brushing, and this will get into all the cracks and crevices and just make everything pop even more. And this is like a fantasy kind of dirty world. And as you can see, and now that it's dry, I'm going to make all the detail pop again, and I'm using my last highlight color and just dry brushing everything again. Trying to be careful not to go overboard with the dry brushing, but, sometimes it happens, But obviously I did the roof tile, or did the shingles, now I'm doing all the timber framing. It was just a matter of going over and making everything pop, but that wash is still there, and it does show through, but it just it gives the house a aged look, if that makes any sense. And of course, I'm using the desert sand here and going over all the stucco work just to make it a little bit brighter again. In all honesty, you could have just left the stucco alone. I could have just left the stucco alone at this point. If I wanted to go for a really dingy, dirty look, I would have left it alone. But I wanted to go for a little bit bright, happier look, I guess you want to call it. Even though I'm not known for happy stuff. And then I'm hitting all the stone with a light gray dry brush quick. Oh, and I did paint the metal parts of the door with brass prior to washing, and I hit all the grating with dark silver, just so it pops out. I hit the photo button and not the record button for those two steps. I do that a lot. But, Again, I'm trying to keep my dry brushing so it goes from the top down just to look more like a highlight, like the sun's hitting it. But for the most part, that's what I'm trying to do. Not always successful, but I try. Now some homemade pigment powder. This is made out of soft pastel chalk that's scraped into a powder. And just adding like some dirt and shadows in areas where I think it would collect, or anywhere I think would look good, like in the corner where the windows are popping out of the roof, or underneath the windows, or in corners where the timber frames. Anywhere that I think it could use some shadow, or where it makes sense to me. So anywhere and everywhere that I think would look good to have this like nasty dark brown pigment powder that I made, and to look good. I like my buildings to have a worn, weathered look to it, if that makes any sense. So that's another reason to add like this dirt nasty look. I don't want it to look like it was just built yesterday. Now once I get all the pigment powder on, I'm just taking some isopropyl alcohol in a little mist spray bottle and then spraying it all over the place. This will help lock the powder in, and I'm very happy with how this looked. The way this turned out was just, it fits perfectly into how I build all my terrain. It has like a worn down, beat up, nasty look to it. And that this building would fit perfect in any of my tables. Hey everybody, if you made it this far, it means you watched the end. As always, I cannot thank you enough. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you know when I do put a video out, because I try and put them out whenever I can, and I don't have a regular schedule. So hit the notification, you'll know when I do put one out. Join me on Friday or Saturday evenings. I do live streams, live crafting from the basement. Whatever I'm currently building at the time, you'll see me crafting in real time. And whatever I'm crafting in my live streams is exclusively done for that live stream. So come check them out if you have time. And if you want to get a hold of me directly, come to the Discord. I would love to see what you guys are building. Give me ideas or, you know, suggestions on what to make next. So come to the Discord. Love to see you all there. But as always, guys, always remember, it's like when you're building your buildings, terrain, or whatever, the only person you got to worry about is you, because it's your terrain.